Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. It's Monday the 28th of March. I'm Andrew Wilson and this is Scotland at 7. This evening I have the latest daily update for you from Ukraine on day 33 of the illegal Russian invasion. Then I'll introduce this evening's guest, and then together we'll take a look at today's headlines from Scotland and around the world. The Kremlin has said peace talks between Russia and Ukraine may get underway in Turkey on Tuesday, adding that it is important that the discussions are held face-to-face, despite the scant progress in the negotiations so far. Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky used a video interview with independent Russian media outlets to signal his willingness to discuss having Ukraine adopt a neutral status and also make compromises about the status of the eastern Donbas region in order to secure a peace agreement with Russia. But he said he would not be willing to discuss Ukrainian demilitarization and that Ukrainians would need a vote in a referendum to approve their country adopting a neutral status. Russia's Foreign Affairs Minister Sergei Lavrov appears to have ruled out any direct meetings between Vladimir Putin and Zelensky, saying that it would be counterproductive at this point. The southern Ukrainian city of Mariupol is on the verge of a humanitarian catastrophe and must be evacuated, its mayor has warned. Vadim Boychenko said about 160,000 civilians were trapped in the city without any power. Ukraine has no plans to open humanitarian corridors to evacuate civilians from besieged cities on Monday because of intelligence reports warning of possible Russian provocations along the routes, the Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk has said. The Ukrainian military claimed in its latest operational report that Russia has withdrawn troops that were surrounding Kyiv after significant losses. The UK's Ministry of Defence released its latest intelligence report, claiming there had been no significant change to Russian forces' dispositions in Ukraine over the past 24 hours. Schools in the Ukrainian capital Kyiv will reopen today via remote learning online. And the UK government's Cabinet Office has issued a procurement policy note for public sector organisations holding contracts with Russian or Belarusian suppliers, urging them to investigate whether they can cancel those contracts. Now, we are lucky enough this evening to be joined by a regular contributor, Chris McCusker. Chris is a trade unionist, carer, disabilities advocate, and a humanitarian aid worker. He's also the nearest thing that South Glasgow has to the chef Rick Stein. Chris, good evening, how are you?
Oh, if I could only emulate the great man Rick Stein. All the better for seeing you, Andrew.
Well, thank you for joining us, Chris, and I won't suggest for a second that you're more used to visiting paradise than Padstow, but we should be getting on with the news first of all. Face-to-face peace talks between Ukraine and Russia are likely to start in Turkey on Tuesday, the Kremlin has said, as Kyiv insisted that with Moscow's invasion largely stalled, it was not prepared to make any concessions on its territorial integrity. The Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Turkish counterpart Recep Erdogan agreed on Sunday that ceasefire talks would be held in Istanbul. Officials have played down the chances of a major breakthrough, but observers said the two sides' first in-person encounter since a bad-tempered meeting between the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and his Ukrainian counterpart Dmytro Kuleba in Antalya on the 10th of March was a sign that the dynamics may be shifting. Kyiv has suggested that with Russia's invasion forces held up by stiff Ukrainian resistance, heavy losses and mounting tactical and logistical problems, Moscow may be more willing to compromise as its hopes of installing a new government fade. Having failed in its attempt to encircle the Ukrainian capital and force the government's capitulation, the Russian Defense Ministry said last week that it was shifting its focus to expanding the territory held by pro-Russian militias in eastern Ukraine. Both sides have spoken of a possible formula under which Ukraine might accept some kind of formal neutral status, but neither has shifted on Russia's territorial claims, which include Crimea, seized by Moscow in 2014, and the eastern Donbas regions. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said at the weekend that some form of compromise involving Donbas might be possible, but did not suggest the region would be ceded, making clear that territorial integrity is Kiev's priority. President Zelensky, who has also suggested the question of neutrality could be put to voters in a referendum after Russian troops withdraw, said that Kiev understands it is impossible to liberate all territory by force, but that his country's sovereignty and territorial integrity are beyond doubt. So, Chris, it seems that perhaps there is little immediate prospect of much significant progress. The meeting between the foreign ministers on the 10th was reported to have been fractious. Putin has given no hint, let alone any suggestion, about where compromise could be found, and I think that's unlike Zelensky. So what do you think of the prospects for compromise between an invader who has a history of wars of attrition and a long history of not bothering at all about shelling and bombing schools and hospitals and old folks' homes, and even less bothered about how many soldiers are killed on one hand, and a defender on the other hand, who has dug in and is defending their homes and their freedoms?
Well, I think anyone would be naive at the start of this conflict to think that it was going to be over within 2 or 3 weeks. I think it's going to be a long, protracted conflict, and without compromise, I don't think it's going to be resolved. And Zelensky's 100% right. And with reference to the humanitarian corridors not being opened, he has to work on intelligence that he is receiving and act on that accordingly. And obviously with caution. At the end of the day, it's his citizens' lives that are at risk. And we can tell over the course of the last 2 or 3 weeks that Vladimir Putin is not a person that can be trusted readily. It was interesting. I was reading a quote, I think it was on CNBC, that a Kremlin spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, had told the various reporters that the discussions were likely to take place in Turkey. And he alluded to the fact of the humanitarian corridors, had to be part of that discussion. So I mean, I think it's wholly right that they treat this with extreme caution, so that they can try and avoid any further casualty and loss of life.
Absolutely, Chris. And also with regard to this story, it struck me as interesting that it's Turkey, which is a NATO member, which is brokering these discussions, and not, for example, Israel, which is currently close to both Russia and the US, or Finland, which has hosted peace deals like this before, and which also has a close understanding of thinking and the approach that we see from Moscow. So why do you think that the Turkish President Erdogan has stepped forward into these discussions at the moment?
Well, I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, I've got my own conclusions about Israel. Obviously, they have tried to remain as neutral as possible because they still heavily rely on Russia. With the ongoing conflict in Palestine. That's not what we're discussing this evening, but I think Erdogan is trying to maybe maneuver himself into the international stage as someone who has got a level head on him, someone who is willing to be the statesman that's obviously missing in this sort of like conflict. I think that's if if you indulge me, I think that's like putting Priti Patel at the head of the UN human rights. You know, I mean, it's, but I mean, you know, listen, it might work, and you know, if it does work, then you know, fair play to him. But you know, I don't want to say that a leopard can't change its spots, but by the same token, you know, I think everybody grows a bit wiser as they hopefully mature in years, shall we say.
Well, I suspect that both you and I are qualified to talk about maturing in years at the very least, Chris. But at the same time, leading refugee charities have called on the UK government to scrap visa requirements for Ukrainian refugees amid mounting anger about the government's slow progress in issuing paperwork to people fleeing a war zone. Applicants to host Ukrainian refugees under the Homes for Ukraine scheme have expressed concern that some refugees are being forced to remain in the conflict zone while UK visas are processed. A Conservative councillor resigned from the party at the weekend after being shocked at the red tape surrounding the Ukraine visa system, which she said reflected the government's hostile and xenophobic approach to refugees. Samantha Flower had applied to sponsor a 17-year-old Ukrainian boy to live with her family in Buxton, Derbyshire, but said she had been met by delays and bureaucracy. The child has been forced to remain in Ukraine while the paperwork is processed. If he doesn't make it out alive, it's because the red tape prevented it, she said. Her unease was reflected by a statement from the heads of the Refugee Council, the British Red Cross, Save the Children and Oxfam, who warned that the visa system was causing great distress to already traumatised Ukrainians. More than 3.9 million refugees have left Ukraine in the past month, according to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. More than 2.2 million of whom have ended up in Poland. The Home Office has granted 21,600 visas to Ukrainians who are hoping to join relatives in Britain under the Ukraine Family Scheme. Michael Gove's Department for Leg Up, which is handling the parallel Homes for Ukraine scheme for people who do not have family in the UK, has not yet released any figures about the number of visas they have granted. However, refugee hosting charities say that the numbers of people coming through this scheme are so far tiny. An opinion poll released on Sunday by Savanta Comres indicated that 54% of people in the UK support a no-visa policy and would like to allow an unlimited number of Ukrainians who are fleeing the Russian invasion to come to the UK. So, Chris, firstly, this Conservative councillor in Derbyshire resigned from her party at the weekend after being shocked at the red tape surrounding the UK's Ukraine visa system, which she said reflected the government's hostile and xenophobic approach. Is she correct?
Yeah, and you know, one can only hope that that's maybe her sort of like changing attitude, shall we say. You know, you actually stole my thunder because you quoted that opinion poll. I was wanting to quote that opinion poll from Savanta Comres because I'm one of the 54. Sorry?
We'll talk about that one next. I promise.
Yeah. No, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm, you know, just one of those 54% that's in favour of dropping the visa rule. So you know, I mean, it does. She's quite right. You know, I think that the actual system itself that the British government have come out with. And you know, I emphasise obviously the British government. Again, I don't need to you know tell you the fact that immigration matters are wholly reserved to wastemonger. So you know, I think that they have designed this system in order to fail. Because you know, I mean, and this is only my own point of view, but I think that you know, Britain in itself, you know, is inherently racist. You know, the actual establishment of Britain should I say, is inherently racist. That's not to say the British people are inherently racist. Quite clearly, if you cite that 54%, then I actually think that if you slim that 54% down and look at it towards the Brexit vote, I think there was at least 10% in that were wholly duped. Because we know that they were openly lied to, they were easily manipulated, and they were overawed by the mainstream media that was obviously pushing the rhetoric of the government at the time, aided and abetted by Nigel Farage. With the despicable poster that we all remember of the lines of refugees. We all remember the wholly unwarranted go home vans that were, going round various housing schemes and stuff like that in Lower England. So I mean this buys into that narrative. And as I say, I think it's a system that is designed to fail. So that the UK does not take, even anywhere close to what it expects or what it spouts to propose to take. I mean, it's one thing to propose and stand up, and actually openly lie at the dispatch box and say, Britain has taken in thousands, upon thousands. When the actual number, as you say, is more like in the hundreds. That is openly lying.
The designed to fail is a good way of putting it, Chris. I was also going to ask you, I know that you've been busy recently as the organisations that you work with, as they pivot to offer support to Ukrainians, both in Ukraine and seeking to flee from the war. What's your most recent experience over the last week or so? What are you hearing?
Well, I mean, honestly, on the ground, logistics are the one thing that are being severely hampered, and that's been hampered by the British government, and that is a direct quote from a Scottish National MP. Everybody knows who my MP is, so. I mean, Poland and Ukraine do not want direct aid at this moment in time. They have said that. They said that 2 weeks ago. However, my charity, Eastwood Refugee Aid, I mean, we've been supporting our friends at Care for Cali because they, in turn, like ourselves, do not discriminate against white Christian refugees and brown Muslim refugees. A refugee is a refugee, so it's a great opportunity for me to say there's a truck leaving Ibrox, actually, funnily enough, in the south side of Glasgow on Friday, to which Eastwood Refugee Aid are contributing a substantial amount of sleeping bags, duvets, warm blankets, boots, and medical supplies, baby care items such as nappies, pseudocreme, and just normal run-of-the-mill painkillers and such like. And that'll go a long way to help them. But what they really need, and what I would urge people to do, is the government scheme that obviously Nicola Sturgeon has endorsed, and where if you go onto the government website, I think it's the DEC, and for every 10, 20, 30 pounds, they will double it. And that direct financial aid will, help enormously. But the coming back to Scotland and this system, The stock that my charity is actually sitting on is, I mean, we're waiting for Ukrainian refugees to come to Scotland. I mean, we are still waiting for the Afghan refugees to actually get resettled into homes. They're still languishing in hotels across Scotland, and they can't access the direct aid that we've got. So from that point of view, no matter all the plaudits and stuff like that are coming out of Westminster, they are hollow, to say the least, obviously to people like you and I who, are working in that situation and reporting on that situation, and we can see a difference. Whereas when they're putting it out on the cameras for mainstream media and stuff like that, people just swallow it up because it's force-fed through their homes, through their walls, and and they're too apathetic and too lazy to actually go and do their own research. This is the whole ethos of Broadcasting Scotland, is to try and sort of like change people's attitudes towards quality news content. So they can get away with it with complete impunity, and yes, they can be challenged by the opposition, but by the same token, when they're sitting on such a large majority, they've got carte blanche to do what they want.
Indeed, Chris, and as you say, hollow to say the least. Let's move to our next item now, because a Ukrainian MP has raised alarm about Russian soldiers raping and sexually assaulting women during its invasion, and has said that Ukraine will not be silent about these crimes. In a TV interview, Maria Mezhentseva referenced one case in Brovary, and that's an eastern suburb of Kyiv, where a woman was raped in front of her child. On Wednesday, the Ukrainian Prosecutor General, Irina Venediktova, said the attack was being investigated by the authorities, and Ukraine has told Russia that an arrest warrant has been issued for the serviceman. Speaking on Sky News' Sophie Ridge on Sunday, Mezhentseva said, "There is one case which was very widely discussed recently because it's been recorded and proceeded with by the prosecutor's office. And we're not going to go into the details," she said, "but it's quite a scary scene when a civilian is shot dead in his house in a small town next to Kyiv. His wife was, I'm sorry, but she had to say it, raped several times in front of her child." After the attack, the soldier is believed to have threatened the child. Mezhentseva, who is also the head of Ukraine's permanent delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, said that cases needed to be recorded as justice has to prevail. Rape and sexual assault are considered war crimes and a breach of international humanitarian law. She said cases were being underreported and added that she hoped that the UK could pass on expertise on how to support victims in the aftermath of crimes. There are many more victims rather than just this one case, which has been made public by the Prosecutor General, she said. And of course, we are expecting many more of them, which will be public once victims are ready to talk about that. Her words echoed those of fellow Ukrainian MP Lesia Vasilenko, who addressed UK MPs earlier in March and who said that Russian soldiers were sexually assaulting and raping women. So, Chris, firstly, do you think, is there much prospect of the Russian soldier who's been accused of this rape, this alleged rape in the Brovary suburb of Kyiv, ever being brought before a properly constituted court?
Controversial as it might sound, no, I don't think so. He's probably got about the same chance as your average Israeli soldier that has, been doing it in Palestine. It's been reported because obviously Ukraine is at the forefront of everybody's mind at the moment. It's the main story in the world news media. But sadly, this has been happening, as I say, in Palestine for so long. It's I hate to say it really is an everyday occurrence, totally correct. As a war crime, and and rightly so. It should be challenged, and justice should prevail. But asking the British government to show leadership, and path the way towards justice in regards this matter, regardless of any other matter, as far as I'm concerned, then you're asking a snowball to survive in hell, basically. Britain doesn't really have a great past record. If you look back, throughout history, the times of the empire and all the rest of it. So their track record is not, shall we say, totally unblemished in this regard. And it's a horrible, horrible story, Andrew. It's a hard story for you to actually report on and for me to comment on, because it's just really, really horrible. I've got no other words.
Thanks, Chris. We'll move on to our next item, which is that the SNP has said that Scotland needs independence to escape the Tory poverty trap that has gripped the UK for decades and is being even worse by the Tory cost of living crisis. Following what she called a disgraceful UK spring budget, Alison Thewlis MP warned the Westminster government is actively undermining Scotland's efforts to tackle poverty and exacerbating the problem by imposing cuts and tax hikes and consistently failing to use its reserve powers to reverse rising UK poverty levels. The SNP Shadow Chancellor pointed to the contrast between the Scottish Government, which has introduced the Scottish Child Payment, doubled it, and is now increasing it again to £25 per child per week by the end of 2022, and that amounts to £1,300 of support per eligible child per year as part of its Tackling Child Poverty plan. The Scottish Government has also uprated 8 Scottish benefits by 6%, has a generous council tax reduction scheme, and is spending millions mitigating Tory austerity policies, including £71 million on discretionary housing payments, which mitigate the hardship caused by the UK government's bedroom tax, and will be investing a further £10 million announced to mitigate the benefit cap. In addition, the Scottish Government is providing more support to families than any other part of the UK, including a real living wage for public sector workers and contracts, free personal and nursing care, free university tuition, free bus travel for the under-22s, older and disabled people, the education maintenance allowance, lower average council tax and lower average water rates. In stark contrast, the Westminster Government has slashed universal credit by £1,040, made real terms cuts to benefits for more than a decade, slashed the triple lock of pensions, presided over stagnant real wages, and imposed a range of damaging policies that have made people poorer, including a hard Brexit costing the economy billions, the national insurance tax hike, the VAT tax hike, the bedroom tax, the benefit cap, the two-child cap and rate clause, scrapping the educational maintenance allowance, and raising university tuition fees to £9,250 a year. Natalie Dawn MSP pointed out that Rishi Sunak is the same Tory Chancellor who gave a £4 billion tax cut to bankers in last October's budget, when he cut the banking surcharge from 8% to 3%. So Chris, firstly, was Rishi Sunak's spring budget last week a disgrace, as Alison Thewlis says it is?
No, it wasn't a disgrace. It was absolutely deplorable, shocking, and it done no favours to the citizens of Scotland. And actually, I think, in a, can I use the word perverted sort of way, I think it's actually playing into the hands of Scotland, because many people will look at this budget, hopefully, and actually see how what's the word? How Scotland has been treated in this. The Resolution Foundation said an additional 1.3 million people will be pushed into absolute poverty by next year, and that includes 500,000 children. And that is willfully done by the Westminster government, because I watched Richie Sunak this afternoon when he was holding front of committee, in order to explain his spring budget, and he had no explanation and he had no contrition for actually setting that budget and the policies that he laid down. It's very much, and I'm hopefully we're going to touch on the P&O debacle, but it's very much like when the boss at P&O was holding in front of the committee, and he held his hand up and said that he broke the law. Pretty much the same. Rishi Sunak said, he didn't say it in so many words, but he pretty much said, if I was to do that budget again, I would do the exact same. So I mean, there's nothing in that budget. And the one thing that I want to point out in that litigation of positives that the Scottish government have done, in order to try and mitigate the worst of the effects that are shortly going to hit many of our citizens, is the fact that the Scottish government have doubled the child payment, and have uprooted many of the benefits that are devolved to Scotland and all the rest of it. Yet at every point in turn, the Scottish Labour Party constantly ask for more. I mean, we doubled the child payment to £25, and they're insisting the fact that we put it up again to £40. They can only do that because they're in opposition. They have got absolutely no plans whatsoever. They are wedlocked to supporting the union, for fear of them losing money. And becoming a complete and utter irrelevance within Scotland, and again, ably supporting anything, radical and positive. Just very, very similar to the Lib Dems, very, very similar to the Tories. Anything that Scotland does as a positive that we can do with the limited powers that we've got, they always try and argue the case for more. And it is simply, it makes for boring politics. It makes for boring politics.
Absolutely, Chris. As you say, no plans from the opposition in Scotland at the moment, and no policies. Let's look at another aspect of the current Tory cost of living crisis, because fuel poverty campaigners have written to Ofgem, the UK's energy regulator, urging it to take action to reduce electricity standing charges, which they say are discriminatory. When the energy price cap rises on Friday, most households will face an increase of at least 80% in the standing charges they pay for electricity, with much of the extra cost a result of the failure of 30 suppliers during 2020. The standing charge is applied daily and is charged regardless of how much energy the customer uses. The wide difference in standing charges on standard electricity bills across the will see customers in Scotland pay some of the highest charges, with consumers in the south of Scotland facing a 100% increase. The price per day in South Scotland for a single rate electricity meter from April 2022 will increase from 24p to 47p. In the north of Scotland, it'll rise from 22p to 48p a day. That's an 83% increase. And with the exception of southwestern England, Scotland already pays the highest standing electricity charges in the UK. It has also been reported today that the UK government's energy strategy has been delayed again, despite it having been promised this week. Scotland is already unfairly penalised by Westminster's transmission charges by having to pay the highest grid charges in Europe, and it has one of the highest proportion of households off the grid due to remote living. Those households are set to pay up to 4 times higher energy bills than the average household because their bills are not capped. Add to this a further surge in energy bills for everyone due to the cost of living crisis. Commenting, the SNP's energy spokesperson, Alan Brown MP, said millions of families in Scotland already face a devastating blow to incomes as the Tory cost of living crisis spirals out of control, with energy and food costs rising higher and higher. And we unfairly pay the highest grid charges in Europe. Now we are set to be hit hardest by a rise in standard charges for electricity bills. Now then, Chris, in that item, it struck me as the list of aspects in which Scottish consumers and Scottish families pay the highest charges in terms of their standing charges, which are leaping by up to 100%, in terms of the transmission charges that are embedded in the cost of energy in Scotland, as we pay the highest charges per gigawatt hour to access the national grid. And also, as we knew, for those who are living on grid in the north of Scotland, their energy costs are often £800 to £1,000 higher than the average in the south of the country. And now, of course, it's being pointed out that those who live off grid, and that means off the gas grid, they rely on heating oil to heat their homes and for hot water, and there's no price cap on heating oil at all, and we know that the price for heating oil has skyrocketed. So what do you think that the combined message of all of those ways in which Scottish energy users are penalised in comparison to the rest of the UK, do you think is that message starting to get through to energy consumers and to voters more generally?
Well, again, I'm hoping that this will actually feed into the whole debate about Scotland being independent, and I'm hoping that people are going to open their eyes and wake up and smell the coffee. I mean, I want to reiterate what Ofgem actually does. It caps the payments for consumers on a standard default. And the tariffs in Scotland, Wales and England vary by region upon region. And this comes again, and yet another delayed report from Westminster. At the end of the day, it's an energy price robbery. It's basically given the energy companies carte blanche to don a mask and basically stand in the highway and and ask people to deliver. The old Adam and the ants, showing my ages again. But I mean, honestly, it's profiteering on a grand scale, and the Westminster government are giving them carte blanche to do that, because when we look at our European friends, the likes of in France and in Italy and in Spain and Germany, they have all put up the government has put a price cap on it at roughly around about 4%. It varies from country to country, and the government are swallowing as much of it as possible, and private citizens and businesses are pretty much protected. That this despotic regime that we are suffering under, that we are hostage under, as deliberately doing this and not taking any action because they are wholly incompetent. And if you just look at this one issue, let alone the rise in poverty and inequality in the world and all the rest of it, or should I say within Britain, but if you look at this just one issue, before we hopefully go on to discuss yet another wholly incompetent episode from the UK government, we will look at this one issue, and yet people are looking at Britain to stand up as world leaders in the brokership of the war in Ukraine against Russia. Britain, people are looking to Britain to be, set the standard for Israel and Palestine, and people are looking to Britain to be the, stand up in the international stage. I'm sorry, but we've got a Prime Minister who is a complete and utter clown. He has got no idea of how to run a country. He is riding on the coattails of a gravy boat, and he will do so for as long as possible in order to amass amount of money. Rishi Sunak, again, his wife is worth more than the Queen. Now, you know, if that doesn't tell you everything about inequality in Britain today, then, you know, what does? You know, Rishi Sunak's wife could actually wipe out the energy cap price hike without even opening her purse, for God's sake, and this would be all over and done with. It is ineptitude at the highest level to allow this to continue without taking any action.
Ineptitude, as you say, Chris. Let's move on to another story that I know you were keen to talk about, because P&O Ferries has one last opportunity to U-turn on the sacking of 800 crew and must lift this week's deadline for the employees to sign redundancy and non-disclosure agreements, the government has warned. The Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, wrote to the firm's chief executive, Peter Hebblethwaite, today, spelling out his intention to legislate, informing Hebblethwaite that P&O Ferries would be left with little choice but to reverse your decision in any case. He warned Hebblethwaite that his position as chief executive and a director has become untenable. In the letter, which Shapps posted on Twitter, he has also outlined plans to bring in a package of measures to block the outcome that P&O Ferries has pursued, including paying less than the minimum wage. This came as the Commons Transport and Business Committees wrote a joint letter to Shapps demanding that Hebblethwaite be struck off as a company director as a not fit and proper person, after he flaunted his contempt for the law at last week's hearings into the mass sackings on the 17th of March across P&O Ferries' UK fleet. Hebblethwaite admitted the firm broke the law by dismissing the workers without consultation, amid plans to bring in cheaper agency crew at below UK minimum wages, saying, "There's absolutely no doubt we were required to consult with the unions. We chose not to do that." Unions today met with two other large ferry operators from UK ports, DFDS and Stena Line, and government officials to discuss the crisis and alternative provision of services. The RMT General Secretary, Mick Lynch, said the sacked workers have to be reinstated and we need regulation and legislation to secure UK-based seafarers' jobs and agreed contracts of employment. So, Chris, why has Grant Shapps suddenly decided to strengthen workers' rights when for most, if not all of his political life, he's been campaigning to reduce them and has always voted against workers' rights?
Well, you know, now I need to step out of the cupboard and change my hats from humanitarian and unpaid carer and put on my trade union hat here. We have to bring up from the depths of the grave a certain Chris Grayling. Famously, the Seaborne Ferries fiasco. Just a reminder of viewers, the ferry debacle during Brexit, when they actually failed to procure any ferries, in order to operate a smooth trading continueship between Britain and France, and wonderfully spaffed £14.5 million up against the wall, and turns out that there's absolutely no ferries whatsoever. Meanwhile, back at Holyrood, Douglas Ross is slagging off the First Minister because we've got two ferries that are, delayed and costing extra money. But hey, that's a separate issue. Let's get back on to the debacle with P&O. And I need to stress this actually, because I found this out in a couple of trade union meetings. P&O Ferries is a completely different and totally isolated entity from P&O Cruises. So any viewers that are watching tonight, you can have complete faith in P&O Cruises. It's a separate company. It's not owned by the same company. It's not owned by DP World, and their services are unaffected. Their staff are unaffected, and you'll still be able to go on holiday. This is, as I say, Chris Grayling was the one that initially watered down certain parts of the trade union bill, excuse me, which the Tories managed to fantastically run a coach and horses through, in the run-up to Brexit. And I will give credit where credit is due. Jeremy Corbyn gave warning about this, and it went totally unheeded. And many trade unionists actually voted for Brexit, and this is the chickens coming home to the roost now. And I'll take no lectures from people in the RMT that are, suddenly trying to stand up for their workers, as valiant as it is. I stand in solidarity with the workers, but I don't stand in solidarity with the RMT, because they woefully urged their comrades in order to vote for Brexit, knowing the fact that Chris Grayling actually watered down and created the loopholes that DP World are actually enacting at this moment in time. And, the sacking and making 800 people completely redundant, and replacing them again with, and I hate to be brutally honest here, but slave wages. We're talking about in between £1.84 and £5.50 an hour that these scab workers have taken over the operation of several crafts. And one craft has actually been detained at port, due to the fact that there was a whole litany of health and safety issues with regards to that actual ferry being in operation. And if they were willing to put that ferry to sea, they were willing to put the people that were going to be paying to get on that ferry, they were going to put those lives in danger. And this is what happens when when you willfully go out to dilute trade union law, trade union rights, health and safety rights. This is exactly what happens when you do that. If you pay peanuts, you will eventually get monkeys. And as comedic as that analogy is, at the end of the day, I hate to be brutal, but we're talking about people's lives, because when a conveyance is used for public transport, such as a ferry, such as an aircraft, because my experience in the aviation industry, health and safety is the number one priority, and you have to put passengers first. You put passengers first long before you put employees first.
Thanks, Chris. Now then, Laura Kunsberg will replace Andrew Marr as the permanent host of the BBC's Sunday morning political interview programme as part of a reshuffle of the broadcaster's on-screen staff. Ms. Kunsberg is preparing to step down as the BBC's political editor after more than 6 years in that role, and will start her new job in September. Her final job as political editor will be to cover May's local elections, and she will also be cutting back on her commitments to other outlets, such as the newscast podcast. She beat the long-term Radio 4 Today programme presenter Michal Hussain to land Marr's former Sunday role, with the promise of a new-look format. Michal Hussain is tipped for other television roles as they become available in the coming years, with internal candidates already positioning themselves to replace Hugh Edwards as the host of News at 10. Laura Kunsberg had been in discussions about a move to the Today programme. It is expected that she will receive a pay rise from her existing £260,000 salary. Marr received £335,000 a year in his role. Her new salary will be published alongside the BBC's annual report in the summer. So, Chris, and the interim director of BBC News, Jonathan Munro, said that Laura is the perfect host for our flagship weekend show. She's such an engaging presenter and a razor-sharp political interviewer, and she knows exactly which questions audience want answered. Now, that's except perhaps, of course, for voters and viewers in Scotland. What does it say about BBC News that this appointment has been made?
Sorry, I was just going to stretch for the sick bucket there. I was really hoping that we weren't going to discuss this. You know, I mean, I find it really, really repugnant, the fact that she's getting paid £200,000 plus. You know, because that's £200,000 too much. You know, I mean, hey, I mean, I think the headline, you know, that we can attach to this sideshow is the fact that, you know, uh, BBC now becomes GB News. You know, she is the most right wing journalist I have ever had the unfortunate opportunity to actually speak to, and you know, honestly, she is so overtly unionist, it is unreal. And this is going to play bad in Scotland. The viewing figures are going to go down. I mean, not initially, not initially. People will watch it, you know, and then it'll stick in their craw like you know, a hard lump of porridge. And you know, I mean, honestly, you know, I mean, what was it you were saying there? 264,000, you know, a starting salary, and Andrew Marr was getting in excess of 300,000. I mean, Jesus, wept. You know, again, that just highlights the inequality, you know, within this despotic union that we've got to put up with.
As you say, Chris, a hard lump of porridge. Now, survivors of Canada's residential schools have asked Pope Francis to guarantee unfettered access to church records on the institutions where Indigenous children were abused and their culture denied. Pope Francis met with representatives of the Metis and Inuit nations for about an hour each today, the first of 4 meetings this week with Canada's native peoples in what both sides have called a process of healing and reconciliation. It was a very comfortable meeting, Cassidy Caron, the president of the Metis National Council, told reporters afterwards, adding that the Pope listened attentively as elderly survivors told their stories. He repeated truth, justice and healing in English, and I take that as a personal commitment, so he is personally committed to those 3 actions, she said. I felt some sorrow in his reactions. We shared a lot with him, she said. The stated aim of the schools, which operated between 1831 and 1996, was to assimilate Indigenous children. They were run by several Christian denominations on behalf of the government, most by the Catholic Church. About 150,000 children were taken from their homes. Many were subjected to abuse, rape and malnutrition in what the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in 2015 called cultural genocide. Caron said the topic of records came up. Records are held in Canada's dioceses and in archives of Rome headquarters of various religious orders. Archbishop Donald Boland of Regina, Saskatchewan, told reporters that no records were believed to be in the Vatican itself. Canada's Indigenous peoples and the Canadian government want the Pope to visit Canada to make an apology there for the Church's role. Caron said she was not disappointed that the Pope did not apologise today because the Indigenous peoples want him to do so in Canada. That visit is expected to be soon. Vatican sources have said it will likely be this summer. Matan Obed, an Inuit leader, said he asked the Pope to help bring to justice a priest who is accused of abusing several children and is now living in France. The recurring school scandal broke out again last year with the discovery of the remains of 215 children at the former Indian residential school in Kamloops in the western Canadian province of British Columbia. The discovery at the school, which closed in 1978, reopened old wounds and has brought fresh demands for accountability. Hundreds more unmarked burial sites have also been found since. Now, Chris, Cassidy Caron said, whilst the time for acknowledgement and apology and atonement is long overdue, it is never too late to do the right thing. And she said, now it's the Pope's turn to join us in the work. What do you think that the Church can do to atone for what was described as cultural genocide of around 150,000 children and the abuse, rape and malnutrition of many of those 150,000 wee ones?
It has to turn over the records. You know, I'm in no doubt that the Vatican will have, you know, some records. with regards to this. And sadly, this isn't a story that's centralised in Canada. I mean, systemic child abuse by the Catholic Church has happened throughout the world, not least in the west of Scotland as well. It certainly happened in Southern Ireland, from, the days of the famine right through to the days of the Troubles. And there are many records in Ireland that have been lost, burnt, secreted and hidden in order to, cover up this horrendous, long issue of child abuse and child neglect perpetrated by the Catholic Church. Not the Catholic Church as an actual body, but members of the Catholic Church who, vehemently expressed the fact that they were doing God's will. Speaking as an ex-Catholic, maybe I'm not the best person to be commenting on this issue. I'm unaffected by it, personally, but on a moral perspective, I just find that it's a horrible brush to be tainted with. Even as viewers know, obviously, my football affiliations, my own club has been tainted with this brush as well, and it's something that has to be dealt with. It's something that people have to hold their hands up to. They have to at least offer some sort of contrite apology and learn from the mistakes and actually sort of clean up their house and stuff like that in order to try and possibly move on. But they have to recognise what's actually happened.
As you say, Chris, recognise and learn from the mistakes. Now, our final item is that on a visit to Valneva in Livingston today, the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, heard about the impact of up to £20 million of enterprise funding, what it will have in supporting high-quality jobs and driving groundbreaking vaccine research in Scotland. The First Minister was joined on the visit by the Enterprise Minister, Ivan McKee, MSP, and by local constituency politicians, Hannah Bardell, MP, and Angela Constance, MSP. Ms Sturgeon said, "This is a vote of confidence in Valneva and the work that it does." So, Chris, 6 months ago, Valneva's contract to make COVID vaccine was cancelled without notice by the Westminster government. So do you think, is this £20 million investment, is it being made for political purposes? Or is it to protect jobs? Or is it as a strategic public health response, strengthening the supply chain for vaccine production in Scotland in readiness for the next pandemic?
Well, I think it's the latter two that you cite there, Andrew, and I'm particularly upset that Nicola didn't phone me and tell me that she was going to be there. I would have jumped in the car and popped over. But yeah, no, I mean this is great, and it shows Scotland's commitment to the workers. And the actual site itself, just outside Edinburgh, and again, it is chalk and cheese to the Westminster government. As you quite rightly pointed out, the Westminster government pulled out of the R&D to Valneva, and forged ahead with their own pet projects, and I think that they'd done that because they knew that it was a company that they couldn't tamper with. I mean, I would hate to see people, possibly prospering out of AstraZeneca and stuff like that, and all the rest of it. That might be a headline for another 6 months' time. But I think it's vitally important at this moment in time that we carry on again with the research and development, because we actually today have just learned that is it? Now, wait a minute. Someplace in
Thanks, Chris.
Someplace in Asia.
Thanks, Chris.
That's actually possibly looking into another lockdown.
Thanks, Chris. We're now running right out of time, and that was our final item this evening. In making these programmes, Broadcasting Scotland relies on your support. So please consider subscribing or donating to Broadcasting Scotland. You'll see the link to do that on the screen now. We really do need all of your financial assistance. There are other ways in which you can contribute to our work. If you'd like to volunteer, then please visit our website at www.broadcastingscotland.scot and send us a message there. Meantime, we will be here again tomorrow evening with the next edition of Scotland at 7, so please tune in then. I'd like to say thank you to everyone who's been watching us this evening, and especially to our guest, Chris McCusker. Thanks, Chris.
No, thank you, Andrew. Sorry, I just overran there a wee bit.
Not to worry. So that's the way it is at Scotland at 8. I hope that you can join us again soon on Broadcasting Scotland. But in the meantime, please keep warm and keep well. Bye-bye.